guys, Abner Miranda here. Today I've got a drill set up over my shoulder with 8 targets. These are 6-inch plates from Challenge Targets. They're AR-500, 6-inch, quarter-inch steel. So even though they're AR-500, they're not really rated for rifle because of the massive rifle. What I like about these is they're small, they're very light, and the entire target is one of those things where you can walk up to it, step on it, and the target pops right back up when you're ready to reset. The drill that I'm running here is essentially a drill for trigger management while shooting on the move. The reason that I like this drill, and I'm going to shoot this drill in a static position to show you how the trigger control works. It's actually a drill that I learned from Frank Proctor. Most people, me included, like to do double taps by going pop pop, pop pop, pop pop. What Frank Proctor teaches you is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. You acquire your first shot, you pull the trigger, the weapon recoils, you reset. You acquire your second sight picture. You should be watching your front sight in this type of a drill. Understand that when you're in a rolling gunfight, there is target fixation. It's just what you're going to do. But if you have the fundamentals down by doing these types of drills, when you are target fixated, you're naturally going to be looking for that front sight. And like I've shown you guys before, I like running the way of the gun fiber optic sights. When they get light on them, they really, really glow. What I get by running this set of sights from Way of the Gun, they're called the Proctor Y-Notch sights. What I get from it is red dot accuracy, as in like an optic, red dot accuracy, but I get the speed of being connected to the weapon. What a lot of people complain about with an optic on a pistol is that when that weapon recoils, you end up having to try to find where that dot is. Because remember, you're dealing with an optic that was designed for a rifle. So you're dealing with an optic that was designed for, I don't know, about this much eye relief. And now you're dealing with this much eye relief. So it's the difference between looking through a tube or looking through a window. The closer you get to the aperture, the easier it is to see the world past that aperture and around it. And I see this. Understand? I mean, I know I'm stepping on somebody's toes by saying this, but the red dots on pistols, yeah, I'm 6 of one, half dozen of the other, because I find that I sacrifice, and I have one. I find that I sacrifice speed, but when you have really good sights like these, they actually help you with speed. And what you find when you run these drills is you're able to kind of sort of front sight fixate, kind of sort of target fixate, because that really is what you're going to be doing. You're going to be toggling back and forth, front sight target, front sight target, front sight target. And remember, you will steer where you stare. So if I'm watching that target, and if I'm watching that front sight, and just before I pull that trigger, I target fixate, my muzzle will end up doing this, because inadvertently I will want to lower my weapon to look at my target, and I will come down off target. When you're working your trigger, you pull the trigger, and for a brief moment you want to hold. You want to hold onto that trigger, which is your follow through, and then reset, and then you're ready to shoot again. And what that teaches you to do in the infancy stages of shooting is it teaches you to slow down. That's the key to all of this, is slowing down, which is why you're not going 1, 2, 3, 4. You're going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. I like that analogy because it teaches people to imagine that when they pull the trigger, they have just launched a missile. Years ago, when a missile was launched, it actually had several miles of cable that actually spooled out from behind that missile. You actually have to stay on target, and you have to guide that in visually by holding that trigger and watching where you wanted it to go. And that's the analogy that I give a shooter when I'm trying to teach them follow through. Many times on videos when you see me shooting, and on this one you'll see, I'll be shooting, I'll pull, the weapon will recoil, and just as I draw the weapon in, you'll hear it reset as I come out of the trigger. And it's because I'm following through. On that last shot, I'm trying to follow through. You can't always follow through when you're doing hammer pairs, which are, pop, 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 really moving fast. And on movement drills, when you're moving forward or moving sideways, whatever, there's very little follow through. Honestly, there's very little front sight fixation. You're doing a lot of target fixation. For today's drill, I'm going to be running Black Hills ammunition, 115 grain, 9mm full metal jacket. This is my favorite ammo to run because it's very, very consistent. And I know that if I get a click, it's like 99.9% it's going to be the weapon and not the ammunition, unlike some of the other stuff that I've been shooting. So anyways, let's get to it. Come on. Before we get started, you'll notice that what I've got here on the ground is a large painter's tarp. This is for those times where I'm doing drills where I'm not going to be doing any movement, and I want to just save myself time on the ground picking up brass. So this is a shooting tip. Save your knees, save your back. Throw one of these down. You'll be happy for it. The targets I'm working with here, you can tell, are relatively tall. I'm 6'5". And so some of these are, you know, 6'2", 6'3"-ish, 6 foot. I've got these little short ones, not because I hate little people, but because I like to make sure that when I'm working, I'm not doing shooting, the type of shooting that I call gimme shooting, which is basically shoot, 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 where all I've got to do is just basically track horizontally and never have to deviate my sights. I want to work at it because gunfights are not static. Gunfights are not always predictable. The bad guys are not always the same exact height. So anyways, I also wanted to show you guys the back sides of these targets. These are 6-inch plates from Challenge targets. And all I've done is just mounted them right to the 2x4 by drilling through and running hardware through so that I can tighten the plate on. The reason for that is Challenge targets makes a great head that slots down, holds the target, and just drops right down on top of a 2x4. The problem is they're designed for an upright environment. My targets get hit hard and they end up hitting the ground. Sometimes they bounce off one another or they bounce off rocks which are further down range, and I don't want to bust up the heads. But I do want to pay homage to Challenge targets because these are some of the best targets I've ever had. In fact, when I bought these, I thought to myself, where have you been all my life? Because these guys have changed how I train. Let's have a look at how this works. All right, like I said before, this drill is done in a controlled cadence. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. All right, that was actually gratifying that I actually got that done in one take. God's honest truth, I have not done that since, I want to say, last October, something like that, and it is now near the end of April. That drill is very simple. Anybody can do that drill. I acquire the first shot and I take it. I acquire the second shot, and as I begin to take that, begin to actually pull that trigger, I just transition my eyes, and maybe partially my head is moving, I'm not really sure. I transition to the next target that I've got to address, because I already know I've got a solid shot on target number 1. And what I like about this one is, unlike shooting static steel, where you're just not trying because all your targets are standing there and they're usually the perfect, they're usually the same height and the targets are relatively large. I'm shooting small targets that you guys noticed on shot number 1 had already begun to either just do this straight back or had begun kind of wobbling to one side. So I've got to chase them with my front sight. And what I'm finding is with a fiber optic front sight, it allows me to have the effect of a red dot without having to have that wobble effect where I've got to find that red dot back in my window again. Many years ago, I got a chance to go to the Rogers range. Tier 1 group in Arkansas has one that was actually certified by Bill Rogers. For those of you that don't know the name Bill Rogers, do yourself a favor, just kind of here on YouTube, look up. In fact, I've actually got a video of me at Rogers Range, but look up some of the other videos from Rogers Range. And also, if you have a chance, look up his book, Be Fast, Be Accurate, Be the Best. I've got it, I've read it twice. I love that book. It has changed a lot of how I look at shooting. One of the things that he teaches that has significantly changed how I train is aim small, miss small. And what he means by that is, don't aim for the center of the guy's chest. Aim for the second button on his shirt. If you aim for this button, I mean like literally aim to hit this button, dead center, this button. If you miss this button, you hit the guy's chest. Yeah. So that's why I like to shoot, even though I'm shooting targets that are relatively large, the actual target itself is actually very small. You know what? I'm going to leave that in. I'm going to leave that in the video because I want you guys to see what it looks like when you outrun your front sights. Driving instructors will tell you never outdrive your headlights. Well, shooting instructors will tell you never outshoot your front sight. There was a lot of splintering wood because I was completely and utterly target fixating as opposed to toggling back and forth between my front sight and my target. And you'll notice that my speed, and I'll have to check later on the video, my speed actually began to pick up and get faster because I was not breathing. I was getting sucked into the moment and I was target fixating. So I'm going to set this back up again and try to run a clean drill for you guys before I let you go. Before I jump into the next drill, I wanted to show you guys a little life tidbit about working with steel. That little bit of fun right there. That is part of the copper jacket that has embedded itself into the 2x4. And when they're that big, I pry them out. Because if I don't, I'll get a helpful shooter out here will try to help me set up my targets, and they will open their hand up on that. And when you're pulling these out of the wood, woo buddy, be careful because they are very, very sharp. And that's because all these targets are on the same plane. They're all pretty much side by side, and they're sending fragmentation into one another. You know what? This is a good point right here because this goes to show you something that I learned at a class many years ago. I'm trying to find some more damage on some of these. Many years ago I was at a rifle class and we were talking about terminal ballistics and getting shots through cars and all that kind of jazz. And at that moment, as I was watching the instructor, I was at a town defense class. Chase Jenkins was giving us a ballistics demo. And as I was watching, I remember thinking to myself, if a person is hiding behind a car, or any structure for that matter, and you start zipping rounds through that, and all those little fragments that I showed you start coming through and start cutting that person up, and they start seeing themselves bleeding from multiple directions, from multiple wounds, that's going to distract them. And their distraction is my benefit. All right, let's try this again. Aim small, miss small. That one's being difficult. All right, clean run. Aim small, miss small. I was picking up brass a few minutes ago, and it suddenly hit me that there's something that I forgot to tell you guys. I mentioned it earlier. If the subject that you're after is hiding, has taken cover on a certain area, and you're able to get rounds through it, one of the things that's going to happen is those bullets are going to start to spall as they go through their cover. I'm sorry, through their concealment, because cover technically stops rounds. So as your rounds are going through that bad guy's concealment, the rounds are spalling and they're fracturing in a bunch of different patterns. And I remember back in the academy in 2000, one of our instructors did a great demo where he took a 12 gauge and he bounced some double-aught buck off of a wall, or some of the bays that we had were actually cinder block. And he set up a paper target leaning on a 2x4 just kind of around the corner. And he basically was telling us, you know, don't peek around the corners like they do on TV because you could capture spall. And of course everyone knows that double-aught buck is essentially a whole bunch of 9mm coming at you at once. And I was picking up the brass a few minutes ago and I found these bullet fragments that I thought you guys might want to have a look at. Imagine this stuff coming at you from all different angles. If a bad guy is taking cover behind something and you zip one of these things into them, they come at you like little saw blades, and there's a fair amount of weight, fair amount of mass here, but that edge is so thin and so sharp that even if someone is hiding, this is going to start slicing into them. Is it going to kill them? I doubt it. I doubt this would have enough energy to kill, but boy, this will really mess you up. The last thing that I'm going to ask you guys before I let you go is, here's a pop quiz. Which round is more likely to cause spall? Is it going to be a pistol round, or is it going to be a rifle round? For those of you that said rifle, you're wrong. It's pistol. Pistol rounds, look at it this way. Pistol rounds weigh on average, 3 times more than, 55 grain 223, or 115 grain, 124 grain, 140 something grain 9mm, 230 grain 45 caliber, you're talking about infinitely heavier rounds, but they're actually moving infinitely slower than rifle rounds are. I mean, they're moving like 45 caliber, for example, is moving just ridiculously slow as opposed to rounds that are zipping out of an AR-15. So what happens is that's mass and time on target, and that bullet is fracturing. And understand, I'm telling this to you as fact. I have stood here and I have caught more 45, 40, and 9mm in the legs and in my belly than I've ever. In fact, I don't think I've ever actually caught. Actually, no, I have caught. I caught a bullet fragment from a 223 at an oblique angle a few months ago that sliced up my hand. And by the way, it will almost always hit you in the lead in the support hand. It'll almost always hit that support hand. It's just what it does. So if you're going to get popped in the hand, you're going to get popped in your support hand. It's going to tick you off. That's what I've got for you guys today. As a recap, aim small, miss small, follow through when appropriate with holding that trigger to the rear and then resetting. When you're moving from one target to the next, try to have very even cadence so that you can keep track of your sights. As you guys saw, and I'm leaving it in the video, you can very quickly outshoot your own sights, specifically your front sight. So learn to focus on that front sight. And if you are working for an agency that needs some information on why it's important to have fiber optic front as opposed to the tritiums that everyone thinks that you have to have them contact me through Facebook. I'll be happy to share the knowledge that I have. You will be amazed at how accurate you can become with good fiber optic front sights. And for those of you that are thinking that fiber optic front sights are weak, I can tell you for a fact. A few weeks ago, I had to cut one of these fiber optic front sights out of one of these Way of the Gun Proctor Y-notch sights, and I stuck a knife underneath it and started to pry on it, and it cracked, and yet it still retained. The front piece and the back piece stayed in place, and I kept hacking at it, pulling on it. I finally had to actually take a blowtorch and melt the rest of it out. It was a sight that had taken some damage, and I needed to heat it up and put some tranny fluid on it to turn it black again. And the point that I'm trying to make is the fiber optic insert just hung in there. So when that happened, it completely erased any fear that I ever have about accidentally breaking a front sight out. And I remember talking to Frank Proctor about this because that was my my big concern. And Frank said, I don't remember the last time I broke a fiber optic insert. So that's comforting. So anyways, as always, I thank you guys for watching. God bless you all. Get those guns out and practice. Have a good one. That one's being difficult.